Welcome back to the Listening Well podcast. My name is Jenna, and this is...
I'm Brittany.
And today what we're hoping to discuss is just the importance of community, especially within the realm of the church, and as well as just the overall effects that it can have on your brain chemistry and... Thanks. Your brain chemistry and your...
Overall health.
Overall health, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay. I am so excited about this because this is so foundational in a Christian sphere. And we're gonna get there, but I love the marriage here between science and faith.
Yeah.
Like I'm just so excited for this particular episode, and so let's get into it. Let's get into the brain. Like,
sounds good.
How we're wired.
Yeah. And so I mean, like, go into just overall like how you're wired, because there's a lot of things that I could go into.
Oh yeah.
So I think just to like start off is in the scientific field right now, loneliness has actually started to become an epidemic. If you are from NapNaz, there actually was a sermon that Ben talked about this, and I remember that so vividly.
Yep,
because
I got it right here. Yep.
And
Hey, yes.
And so and just the importance of community that in the realms of just like how you are wired, because when you interact with other individuals and stuff, like that is such an important aspect of how you learn, especially like if you think of for children. For example, there's this cause and effect relationship called the serve and return. And literally it's like this tennis match that you go back and forth. And so in order for children to be able to actually make all of these necessary connections, and like we are wired as human beings for relationships. Mm-hmm. And when kids, for example, don't get that through like neglect mm-hmm. or trauma, mm-hmm. That actually like will alter their brain architecture. Anyway, and so like I have a few different like scientific articles here that I had. Awesome. Just like some quotes mm-hmm. that I thought were really interesting. Like social interaction is considered a basic human need to other fundamental requirements, just as with other fundamental requirements such as nutrition and sleep. Mm-hmm. Since COVID-19, there has been associations between mental health issues, including anxiety and depression within adults and adolescents. Mm-hmm. So I thought that was just really interesting because, I mean, I feel like you can kind of see since COVID-19, there's been a lot of changes. I mean, that was a really difficult time within everyone's lives, and we're just now starting to get like the aftermath of all of it. And and then in the same realm within how we're wired, there have also been studies that have found that there are structural alterations within two critical brain regions for normal social interaction and emotional control, including the prefrontal cortex, which that is the area within your frontal lobe, which is kind of just right behind your forehead. And it's really important within executive functioning, which is like problem solving, and it just has a huge key role within your ability to like interact with others appropriately and your emotional control, because of the fact that like you have to make those decisions that, hey, like this is an appropriate way for me to react, or this isn't.
Right.
And the other interesting fact about your prefrontal cortex is it's also the last thing to develop. So it doesn't develop typically until your mid-20s. And then the amygdala is a part of your limbic system, and your limbic system is your emotional center. So it is a complex area in which all your emotions kind of start. And I mean, there's so many different things, but yeah.
Yeah, and our connection or lack of connection with others all impact those building blocks of the brain.
Yeah.
And even as we're adults, you know, positive and negative experiences continue to shape, wire, just how we think and different, you know, just circuits of the brain and how that's all impacted and all, affects everything. That's really interesting, man. So I love that you brought up, the epidemic. So there's a book, it's called You're Not Listening, What You're Missing and Why It Matters. It's by Kate Murphy. It's not a Christian book, so just if you're going to go pick it up, church, just be mindful that you're not reading like a Christian author. But it has great tools in it on just being present, the practice of being present with one another, the impacts of how we're just not, as a society, culture in America, we're not connecting and listening well with others. And COVID-19 is brought up, and social media is another, with distractions and how we can be in proximity to one another, but not really present. And so, I have that quote that Kate Murphy has in the book that says, psychology and sociology researchers have begun warning of an epidemic of loneliness in the United States. Experts are calling it a public health crisis, as feeling isolated and disconnected, so not just isolated, but feeling disconnected, increases the risk of premature death as much as obesity and alcoholism combined. The negative, this is like a quote still, the negative health impact is worse than smoking 14 cigarettes per day.
Wow.
She says, indeed, epidemiological studies have found links between loneliness and heart disease, stroke, dementia, and poor immune function. Obviously, this has skyrocketed since COVID-19. And I love that she mentioned that disconnected piece, because it's not just individuals who you think of being isolated. They're staying at home in their the safety of their home. We saw that during COVID.
Yeah.
And we're not just talking about people that might be choosing to withdraw. We're talking about people that are in proximity with other people and are still feeling lonely and disconnected. And so that's what she's writing about. And she also goes on to mention suicide ideation, which is thoughts of suicide among adolescents has doubled since 2008 because of loneliness and social media and things. Obviously, the rise of the smartphone in teenagers' hands. There's a book, The Anxious Generation. I can't think of the author's name now, but his studies have found the link of anxiety among teenagers, and we'll get into this later. Like, we're gonna have a whole podcast on anxiety, but the rise of anxiety and mental health and suicide among adolescents and teenagers, with links to the use of smartphones and social media platforms, especially.
And not only that, I mean, it's not like anatomy wise, you're going through so many shifts and changes when you are going from childhood to adolescence. And I think it can be really dangerous, because a lot of the times you always think like, oh, they're just being teenagers, you know what I mean? But in all reality, like, they actually are having so many huge changes within their body, and that can cause images within their like body image struggles with that. And then, like I said, like, your prefrontal cortex, that is like when your prefrontal cortex starts to try to like begin to develop. Like it's throughout your entire lifetime, but like that's a huge section of it, because then when you get to your mid-20s, that's when it all like is done. But and then you put in like developmental disabilities and how that can be like affected and elongated because of developmental disabilities. And and we haven't even like gotten to the biblical view of community yet and relationship. Like, this is just science. I like to say science is catching up to what God designed. But so we were created for relationship, and people even outside of Christianity recognize that we were created for relationship and community.
Peter Levine, he's a psychiatrist that I listened to. He came up with or psychotherapist and researcher, but he came up with somatic experience, which is how we use our bodies. So soma, the word soma means body. And so when he works with patients who have gone through trauma, he's working with trauma survivors, he created the theory that it's a bodily experience as well. It's not just mental. And he works with people to move through their trauma from a bodily sense. But he said something that I thought was so great. He said, feeling seen, being held, and working cooperatively with others leads to healthy regulations of our nervous systems. This is what I loved. Our true biological nature is connectiveness and relationship with others. And then psychiatrist Dr. Bessel van der Kolk, he wrote a book called The Body Keeps the Score. And again, it's how our bodies kind of store trauma. And so that book is all about that. But he says in his book, our culture teaches us to focus on personal uniqueness, but at a deeper level, we barely exist as individual organisms. Our brains are built to help us function as a tribe. I love that. I mean, even the psychology and medicine and scientific fields recognize we were built biologically and spiritually for connection and relationship. Yeah. And so if it's all right with you, like, I'd love to move into what this looks like.
Yeah, I'm loving this.
I don't want to take, like, this is your podcast. I feel like I'm taking over.
No, you're good.
We're just scratching the surface, because then we get into what God's word says and what we believe as Christians. Yeah. And it's mind blowing. And so as Christians, like, we understand from a biblical perspective that we were created for relationship. And we see this, biblically speaking, we see this with God being triune, that he's three persons in one. He's relational in and of himself. It's who he is. And we see this play out at the very beginning in Genesis, when God creates Adam and Eve. He uses the plural of let us make mankind in our image. We see that those pronouns being used. Is that right?
Yeah.
Okay. I'm not going to pretend to even know anything about English, but and then we find, later when Jesus is baptized, we see all persons of the Trinity being present. We see a mention of the Father being pleased. We see the Holy Spirit descending like a dove. And of course, we have Jesus incarnate being there, being baptized. And so even God in his nature is relational. And if he created us in his image, what does that say about us?
Yeah.
It says we were also created for relationship, for community with him and with one another. And so I would add too that an important piece of this is he designed it to be reciprocal, like in nature. So it's not one way.
Yeah.
It's designed to be a two-way relationship, right? And he created, in his original design, it was good. It was loving. It was respectful. Like in the garden, before sin enters the world, we were at harmony. It was shalom. And then Genesis 3, like, sin enters and it just fractures all of that. Yeah. Fractures the goodness of relationship. Separated. It's like sin separates us from God. It distorts our relationship with one another. But then Jesus comes and he offers another way. And he begins to restore this idea of relationship. And I would say, I would make the claim, and I've had pushback on this and it's fine, but I would make the claim that it's impossible as Christians to live in isolation and rightly reflect the image of God. Like, that's not what he designed us for, to just live in a corner by ourselves, cut off from other people. He created us for one another and to enjoy him. And so, and then Paul, my gosh, we haven't even gotten to Paul's letters to the churches about God's design for community and the body of Christ and the church and all of that. And so we're going to find here, when we start talking about stigmas with mental health, how it has kind of played into this causal impact of wanting to be separated from other people, not feeling safe with someone else because of fear of being judged or not accepted, or you go down the line. But I think if there's one thing that I could say to help kind of, move that needle a little bit, is embracing this idea that instead of like shying away from relationship because it's messy, right? Like, let's be real. I'm a mess. You're a mess. We all have our messes. Yeah. But God chooses to commune with us anyway. And that's how our posture should be with one another. Is I see you. I know you're messy, but that's okay because I am too. And we're going to walk in this life together. So just embrace that people are messy. Yeah. And that's okay. Yeah. We got baggage. Who doesn't? Like, show me a Bible character that doesn't have a past. Yeah. And so I think if we're just able to wrap our minds around that idea that it's just not going to be perfect on this side of heaven, and that's okay. But living into the fullness that God has for us, to be in relationship with one another, to do our best to talk about stewardship a lot, to steward the people that he has given us in our lives, to steward them well, to provide safe spaces for people to belong, to be who they are, to be themselves, and know that, hey, we're going to walk this thing together. We're going to have steps forward and steps backwards. There's likely going to be hurt on both sides. But if we're willing to stick it out, God has so much in store for us. And it's beautiful because it's his design. Yeah. It's his idea. All right. And so again, like, I love that every field recognizes this and just continues to point back to God's truth that we are designed for relationship. I was over this last summer, I started just toying with this idea, this question of what does it mean to be human? Just like in its basic function and definition, what does it mean to be human, and what does that look like? And how does it separate us from the rest of creation? What makes me different than my dog Sam at home? What does it mean to be human? And being created in the image of God is something that is unique to humanity. Being created for relationship, loving, reciprocated relationship is nearly all of what it means to be human. Yeah. And so this is great stuff. I totally hijacked.
You're good.
Your podcast.
You're good.
Like, what thoughts do you have on any of it?
I think like the biggest thing that like is going off in my head is like, for if anyone's listening, that they're kind of like, okay, like, I get that relationships are important, and I get that community is important, but it's so hard. It's so hard. And I mean, like, I can relate 100%. It's so hard when you can't find individuals that like you just mesh with, you know what I mean? And I mean, it's easy to say like, well, just put yourself out there. But in the same token, when you are in the deepest valley, when you are all the way in the deepest low, it is so hard to try and put yourself out there. It's so hard to, even when you have trusted individuals within your life, to sit there and say, I need help, or I need your company around me. And that's so understandable if you are in that deepest valley right now, that like, if you're experiencing that, that makes sense. And I want you to know that like, you are not alone, that there's so many other individuals out there, like including myself, when it can be really hard when you're down there. And the biggest thing I think for individuals who are maybe not in that valley is to ensure that they are surrounding others and being willing and open to see that. And when they see that in someone else, to make sure that you're constantly like, you're taking the time to contact that individual and say, hey, like, how are you doing? Is there anything I can do for you? I wouldn't necessarily sit there and be like, well, let me try and fix this for you, because you can't. Like, that's not something that we as human beings are necessarily supposed to be able to do. But we can walk alongside them, like you were saying. And so, yeah, I think that was the biggest thing that I was thinking about.
Yeah, it is hard. And recognizing there has to be grace on both ends. Yeah. Like, it is hard. And we weren't designed to go deep and be best friends with 100 people. Like, we just, Facebook lies when we have, like, I think Dave has over like 1.5 or something thousand followers. Like, it's crazy. But he's like, yeah, 3 of them are close friends, you know? And so, yeah, we can't be in that intimate space, like that deep friendship. Like, even Jesus, just, you know, he had his 3, he had his 12, and then, you know, you go forth. There's levels of relationship. You know, your circle can be small and it goes out to being more broad. But I think the thing to point out that you were saying is, we all have an ability to be accessible and to be inclusive and to see others. Yeah. And it doesn't mean that you have to be best friends. It might mean like you're there for a season. But communicating and making space in your heart, in your mind, in your calendar, to make time for others that might not be your best friend. Yeah. And that's okay. But just saying, you know, if I've got my 6 friends, like, I'm good. I don't need to make any more, those types of things. Yeah. I think that it can be a dangerous mentality. It might be true. And again, like, there's balance on both sides of, can't go deep with everybody, and yet we can't make it an excuse either of, I've got my 6, I'm good. Otherwise, nobody, like, there's no space for outsiders ever, for anybody. And so if we all just give a little bit, just taking that step toward someone, and this is what I love about the Lord, is that God constantly moves toward us. He never turns his back. He never abandons. He's constantly in his grace moving toward us. It doesn't mean we always respond well. It doesn't even mean that we follow him. It just means it's who he is, that his love goes so deep for his creation, for his people, and he doesn't desire for anybody to perish. He's constantly moving toward people, and I'm reminded of that often in my own life, and it convicts me then in how I move toward people. Like, if God's going to move toward me, I want to extend that grace to other people and move toward them as well. Yeah. And it doesn't mean that they're going to even respond well to that either. But I have not met very many people, maybe a handful in my lifetime, that have not wanted that. That have said, nope, I'm good. Yeah. We all long for somebody to care, for somebody to notice and love us, to be seen, to be known. It's how we were designed and created, and it's beautiful. But yeah, there's a lot of factors that go into the reasons why we don't, but it doesn't mean those are reasons why we shouldn't.
Yeah.
So yeah, relationship is such a beautiful, messy, difficult, crazy thing.
Mm-hmm.
And the only other thing that I would make mention of from a biblical view is that Satan, the enemy, loves to keep us in isolation.
Yes.
He loves to keep us hidden because that's where he likes to work. If he knows he can get us in a corner away from God and away from others, he starts talking to us and we start listening.
Yeah.
But when we surround ourselves with people in our lives who are speaking truth and living into grace, and we have connection and we're leaning into the Lord and all that he has for us, it makes it so much harder for Satan to reach us.
Yeah.
For us to be accessible to him. And so just being mindful, being aware of those things, not just for yourself, but recognizing it in others. And again, making steps to move toward them goes such a long way, and it's just so beautiful. But
agreed. I think that's an amazing note to go off on.
Satan?
Yeah.
No. Oh, I hope that's not how we ended it. The Lord loves you.
Yes.
There we go.
Yeah.
And with that, I can't believe I didn't even say, like, the greatest commandment, love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength, and
love one another as I have loved you.
Exactly.
And that's like the biggest key of my project, I feel like. I mean, like I sent you that picture the other day. I was like, this is what I want as like the thing that people see when they open up my project.
Yes. Oh, I can't wait. Oh, you guys, it's so good. She's amazing.
Oh, stop.
But so excited for that, and looking forward to our next episode, which is going to be on stigmas and some reasons why we might move away from relationship and community. So looking forward to that, and hope you'll join us back again. So,
yes.
Thanks for listening in to Listening Well podcast. We'll see you next time.